Welcome to Module 10, School Finance and Strategic Planning for 641, School District Operations and Leadership. Again, this is Chris Sadler, Director of Human Resources for the Sun Prairie Area School District. Again, I've introduced other slideshows, so I won't go over my past here. You kind of know it, and I left some of the notes up there. But this slideshow is really important because educational philosophy is really about what you believe as a leader and how it plays out in your everyday work. And this quote by John F. Kennedy always kind of sits in the top of my head: is that children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future. And that's really the baseline for my why, is that the kids we work with are truly going to carry our country, our communities forward. And that's why I place so much importance on being an educational leader. And that's why a lot of educational leaders do what we do. So today when I talk through this slideshow, there isn't a lot of slides, and I'll talk about components and steps. But really in this process, when you're thinking about strategic budgeting, it's not just putting money in accounts and then moving on from that discussion. It's really planned out discussions that are focused on the whys behind every expenditure. A lot of the times when we're looking at student learning, that doesn't sometimes come into the conversation, especially at the district level, about why you're putting specific financial focus on an area. So when you think about strategic budgeting, that's truly what it is. Most of the time you'll hear budgeting, but we have to add that strategy into it, because if our main goal is student learning and serving the needs of our students, those conversations should be really tight with our budget, knowing that our budgets are 80% staff. The other 20% is really, really important to allowing our staff to be successful with kids. So you have to know the why behind each expenditure. The other part that you want to think about is the connected to strategic plan. So you're looking at your strategic plan, which should be the overall why and how and where you're going as a school district. And one thing that I always recommend is looking at your strengths to grow all areas. Because when you look at student learning and you look at your financials, you're going to find strengths. What are you doing in those areas to create those strengths that can inform you to grow all the other areas that you might be struggling in or need growth in? When you're thinking about strategic budgeting, you want diverse but focused perspectives making decisions. And what I mean by that is you want a perspective of the operations side of the district and the academic side of the district. And what that really entails is, how is your financial manager or business director, business manager involved in the conversation with the academic piece of the school district? Because a lot of the times those are separate. They have to be together, because the person that understands the budget best can understand how to best support our academics, and the academic part can inform the budgetary part to think differently about how we're using budget. And you need that all at the table and very focused on that, with student learning always at the center. One thing that I think that I've been a part of in a few different districts is sometimes budget is only talked about in the spring when buildings and districts are proposing their budget for the following year. It really should be constantly regular conversations focused on progress. What are we seeing with student learning? What are we seeing with budget? Are there different ways we can spend money even in midstream to support student learning? And then obviously you're always planning for the future, not just in the spring of every year, but through every year. You're thinking about the future and thinking, okay, so what do we project as our budget, and how does that still connect with our strategic plan? Do we need to have a different direction, or are we seeing progress that we need to continue to focus on, both from a budgetary standpoint and then a more academic standpoint for students? So some steps. These are not end-all be-all steps. These are just things to always think about as you're going through the process. Is obviously you have to start with analyzing current financial and academic reality of the school district. What are your strengths? What are areas in need of growth? How is your budget actually showing up when it's supporting those areas for needs of growth? And how is it actually supporting the needs of strength so it can inform you with that? You want to create a work group with different perspectives, diverse perspectives, like we talked about, kind of an academic perspective, operations perspective, and how do they come together. The next part is you do want to create a structure around policies and guidelines focused on a process. The one thing that you don't want to have happen is if different leadership steps in or steps out, you don't want it to change the whole process just because somebody new comes in. You want it written down. This is how we go through budgetary decisions in a strategic way connected to student learning. You want that within your guidelines and policies. So it's just an ongoing process. Now, can it be tweaked? For sure, when you're thinking about policies and guidelines, but you want something down that's clear, it's on paper, and people can understand it. You want to develop and identify high leverage supports and strategies needed to improve student learning, which we'll talk about later. Is when you go into it, you don't want to just say, well, let's do small group learning or smaller class sizes, because sometimes what you think is something that's very strategic and high leverage actually isn't. So you want to make sure that it's not just anecdotal data. That's an important part, but you need to have that outcome-based strategies that have been proven to work when created with consistency and dedication. And then finally, you want to communicate the strategies and the whys behind the priorities. Not every stakeholder needs to know every little step along the line with budgetary decisions, but they do have to understand the why behind whatever decisions are being made. It just builds trust, number one, but it also builds buy-in too, because if somebody thinks like, I think smaller class sizes are the way to go. That is the strategy. And the district doesn't decide that way. The district has to have some type of reasoning behind it. Like, this is what we found in research. This is what we found in schools with smaller class sizes. And we think this other strategy is more high leverage than that one. So I think that one of the things that you can learn most from, other than just me talking, is the connecting school district budgeting to strategic goals and looking at other examples. There are many examples out there that are really interesting to look at to see how different districts with different demographics actually look through the strategic budgeting and spending standpoint. So there's two websites that are here, and there's plenty others, but these are really simple ones to look at different quote unquote success stories around strategic budgeting. And all I want you to do is think about some questions. You may have to contact your cooperating administrator for guidance just because you may not know the answers to this. But when you're looking at some of these examples, how does their process compare with your current district? What components would you like to see in your current district that you don't currently have? And then finally, project yourself into the future. In my future leadership self, what is the one strategy or idea that I would take from the examples and want to use? So take a look at these. Smarter School Spending is an interesting website. They're part of kind of a collaborative of many districts that look at actually connecting student learning with how you work through your budget. And then the District Management Group is a consulting firm. So obviously it'll seem like they're selling you things, but there are good examples on there for success stories and how they've worked with clients. So it just kind of gives you a sense for how school districts have gone about it. And to me, that's the best way of learning. So take your time looking at those. I think those are important examples to look at. So one of the last things I want to talk about, and sometimes John Hattie and budgeting may not always fit, but to me it's really important. So John Hattie, probably a lot of you have heard, he does a lot of research where he takes meta-analysis. So that means he just takes thousands of studies and kind of puts them all together to find out what strategies work best for student learning. Now, before I even go into this, there are two articles at the bottom that I always think it's important because all research has to be critiqued. You can't just take it for face value, but it's always something you can learn from it. So there's a lot of perspectives on John Hattie's work, where he basically created lists of strategies that show promise in working based on all these thousands of studies, and ones that are kind of on the lower list that don't have as much effect. So you'll hear the word effect size a lot. So he basically created a list like these are the things that work if you do them consistently and with dedication. But obviously, there's critical pieces to that and people that critique it. So there's two articles at the bottom. One is Hattie Isn't Wrong, that's more of a support of the research and going and kind of arguing against the critical part of it. And then John Hattie is Wrong is the other side of the table that is saying that people may feel like John Hattie's research isn't deep enough and takes some studies that they don't feel like are valid. So it's good to know those research sides of the viewpoint because people will ask you and question you, and you want to kind of know both sides so you understand it. However, one thing that I have appreciated about John Hattie's research is it does take thousands of research articles and puts them together to find the results together and really give you a sense for a school district, like what are some things that I can really focus on with budgeting that research shows, and it's not just my eyes or my own thoughts that are telling me that it works. So how does this relate to budgeting? It's really simple. Budgets should obviously be focused on proven strategies, not just I think this will work, especially when you're putting hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars towards a specific strategy. And then it also allows you, again, to define the why when making decisions. So people will ask, why did you spend more money here than there? I think the other, strategy works better. You can kind of have that sense. Well, not only did our committee feel like this was the right direction to go, but this research shows that that it's had good effects in other areas and multiple areas. So another kind of research part on your end is like check out the Visible Learning website. So he wrote a book called Visible Learning, but what's great about this website is you can really dive into different areas of curriculum and just structures of how a school district is put together to find out what are some strategies that have a high effect size and actually show that they do work. And you can put budget towards. And then the other part of that is sometimes the titles in certain strategies don't always make sense when you first read them because you're not sure what they're actually talking about. So I highly recommend looking at the influence glossary, which you can get through the website, but I just directly linked it here, so it's a little faster. But check out that influence glossary because it'll talk about each strategy and what they actually mean, give them just a little paragraph to describe it, and that will help you as you go through it. So again, as you're looking through this, think about how could you use this in order to strategically budget for a school district or a school or a department that you might be in, and how you can use this to better collaborate with other people too, that you can have those deep conversations about where budget should be and how it should be always focused on student learning. Not, it is focused on balancing the budget. That's important. But how do you balance a budget in a way that focuses on student learning? Thank you. You've reached the end of this module. I hope this helped you kind of think through strategic budgeting and how you connect that to student learning. I know it's a little shorter, but it's because there's so many links in there to look through. So take your time in looking through those because those will really help you round out yourself as you look forward into leadership. Thank you.